These lessons are just as much for me as they are for you. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 25 life lessons that I've learned in my 25 years on this earth. Now, this is going to be a pretty long video, so I recommend that you grab whatever it is that you need to get comfortable. Grab a blanket, grab a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, whatever it is. Let's get into it. So lesson number 1, your identity cannot and should not be tied to your accomplishments. So a little bit of backstory about me. I'm Nigerian. I was born and raised in Nigeria. So if you're Nigerian or you know Nigerians, growing up, you really could only be like 3 things. You could only be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Those are the 3 things that your parents pretty much wanted you to be. If you told them you wanted to be like an artist or something, they would be like, are you okay? But just knowing that those were the 3 professions that you could really be to them, to Nigerian parents, you know that a lot of weight was placed on accomplishments, on accolades. You know, were you the first or the second, or did you come first or second in your class for the term? You know, what awards are you winning? Like a lot of weight was put on accomplishment. And so naturally, when I moved to the US, you know, I carried that with me. And a lot of my identity revolved around being like smart, like being, you know, maintaining a 4.0 GPA, getting all these scholarships, and all of those things are good things. They're great things. For me, when I moved to the US, my goal was to become a medical doctor. You know, I was an undergrad for biochemistry. The goal was to, you know, eventually make it out of that program and make my way through to medical school. And so every single thing I did revolved around this one goal. You know, every extracurricular activity I did, every volunteer opportunity, every job, like it all had to be things that could somehow beef me up and make me look good to whatever application committee that, you know, will see me on paper. And so I was working towards that goal. And when I hit my senior year, I applied to medical school and I didn't get in. And there were a lot of odds stacked against me. I'm just gonna say that. But that was the point when I really started considering, you know, is this something that I wanted, or is this something that my parents just wanted for me? So I told myself, you know what, I'll take a gap year. I will go work my nice little corporate job. And, you know, during that gap year, I'll prepare to apply for the next cycle. And during that gap year, it really sunk in that it really wasn't what I wanted. And it didn't really help that I sucked at my corporate job. And so sucking at my corporate job, coupled with, you know, being rejected from medical school, coupled with the identity crises that I was having at that point in time, like I started to go down like a very deep hole where I started questioning everything, like nothing made sense. And I really feel like a big part of it was because I built my identity around being able to do things well, being able to accomplish things, being able to, you know, keep a 4.0 and, you know, get into the honors college and take honors classes. Like my identity was so wrapped around that when I stopped being good at things, you know, aka my job and the other things that were going on in my life, when I stopped being good at things, like it rocked my world. But this is a much longer story. But over the next few years, I started learning who I actually was and started rebuilding an identity that was true to me, that wasn't tied to what I could do and, you know, how it would make me look. And one thing I want to tell you, whoever it is that's listening, I know this is going to sound cliche, but you do not need you don't need anything to have worth. Coming from it from a Christian perspective, you are a child of God. You are good enough as you are. All these other things, sure, they add to you, but your accomplishments, your accolades, all of those things do not define your worth. If you did nothing else, you're still worthy. And so that's also one of the things that I had to learn, was my worth does not come from what I do. My worth does not come from what school I go to. My worth does not come from having a nice job, living a certain type of lifestyle. I am just worthy as I am. I know it's cliche, but you need to believe this to break free from the bondage of thinking that what you do is what makes you you. I mean, what you do does make you you, but you get my point. Lesson number 2. You alone are responsible for your emotions. Yes, you. A life-changing realization for me was that more often than not, we all struggle to regulate ourselves, regulate our emotions, because we didn't have adult figures in our lives who could model that for us. As kids growing up, we saw adults around us lashing out and acting impulsively and doing all sorts of things. And if they couldn't regulate their emotions, you know, our parents, our guardians, our siblings, whoever, if they couldn't regulate their emotions, there's no way they could have taught you to regulate your emotions. Learning this has been honestly pivotal for me, because you switch away from blaming everybody else for, you know, you being the type of person you are, to really refocusing on yourself and realizing that you're an adult. It's now your responsibility to work on yourself. We can be mad at our parents for not modeling this for us, but the truth is they also didn't have the tools to cope. And I only really reached this realization a year ago. Like, I can spend my whole life being upset at people, but, and this doesn't just go for like grown-ups in our lives, like when other people act in certain ways, you can almost, like when you reach that level of awareness, you almost can't even be mad at the person because you realize that this is a dysregulated person. But in that sense, what I'm saying is people can do things to you, people are going to do things to you, but you know, how you manage your emotions after that and how you navigate like your actions and what you do after that is what really matters, and that's where the real work is. And trust me, I know this is so much more easier said than done because a lot of us are just trying to get by. Like, being able to regulate our emotions is really, you know, at the bottom of the list of things we want to start learning how to do, because it's very difficult to do. But at the end of the day, no one else can do this for you but you. Lesson number 3. Sometimes you're the problem. I'm gonna leave that there. Lesson number 4. Sometimes the kindest, most loving thing you can do for people you love is to let them suffer the consequences of their decisions. I think there's a part of us that always wants to protect and, you know, save the people that we love and keep them from making moves that we know will be bad for them. I'll say do your due diligence, advise them, give them counsel, but sometimes your guidance, your advice just won't be good enough. And sometimes people need to learn a lesson multiple times before it sinks in. I know I'm one of them. I've had lessons that I've had to learn several times before it truly sank in my head. Trying to save people from the outcome of whatever they choose to do prevents them from growing and learning lessons that they're supposed to learn, they have to learn. Now, I want to add this, don't just like throw them away. Like, when they eventually make the mistake and they bounce back, they're still our loved one. So we want to welcome them, we want to protect them. We don't need to do I told you so's, but you want to give them a soft place to land after they've made that mistake. Now, the only caveat to this is if they're doing destructive things repeatedly and it starts to affect your own like health and well-being, then I would say, okay, put some distance. And the honest truth is sometimes showing up for people over and over and over and over and over again can really enable them to keep doing dangerous things because they know that they'll always have a soft place to land. But that brings me to lesson number 5. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Boundaries. I know that has been a buzzword in recent years and on social media, but I'm telling you, boundaries will save you from a world of heartache. I truly believe that the earlier you learn how to place boundaries, the better your emotional health will be. Like, I've had to navigate putting boundaries with family, with friends, with work, and it has been tough. But now with boundaries, it's not just about just like, oh, setting a boundary. It's very important to hold them. Listen to this part. It's very important to hold those boundaries. No matter how mean you feel, no matter how terrible you feel, no matter how the other people are going to make you feel, because the honest truth is when you set boundaries, people are going to test them. That just seems to be human nature. Heck, even kids do it. Like, kids unconsciously do it. You tell them, don't do this, and they will do it because unconsciously it feels like there's a part of us that has to resist when somebody puts a fence in front of us on what we can and can't do. Yeah, when you enforce boundaries, everybody's gonna make you feel like you are the worst person in the world. You know, your chest will get tight, your throat will hurt because you just feel like such a bad person. But it is so important to hold it because that's where the magic happens. Because if you can hold it repeatedly, people will eventually learn. If you set a boundary and the next moment, or if you set a boundary and someone violates it, like, they're not going to take you seriously, whether they're consciously thinking about it or not. They're not going to take you seriously. So they're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. Which brings me to the next part about boundaries. Enforce consequences. I know this sounds so harsh, but this is kind of how we humans learn. It's not me, it's science. For example, you tell a family member, and this may or may not be a true story, but anyways, you tell a family member that you don't like when they make comments about your body, and you tell them, if you continue to make comments about my body, I probably won't come around as much. Now, if you communicate this clearly and the next time they do it. Now, personally, I like to give grace once or twice. I don't even know if like this is what you're supposed to do, but I like to give grace once or twice. So if I tell you I don't like this, please stop. The next time you do it, I'm gonna assume, okay, maybe they forgot. So let me remind them very clearly what I don't want them to do. So I'll tell that person again, I don't like when you make comments about my body. Please stop. If you continue to do it, I will be forced not to come around as much. Maybe you come around again and they have something to say about your body. Okay, I might give them a little bit of grace. The third time's a charm. The third time, if that happens, if they still haven't, and I'm not saying this is the right way to set boundaries, but this is just because I'm kind of a wimp, but that's the story for another day. But the third time this happens again, I will be forced to execute the consequences of what I said. So I said I won't be coming around anymore. I'm going to stop coming around. This is how you teach people. I know this sounds harsh, but I promise you, if you want to have, I feel so passionate about boundaries because like I had to learn this stuff in therapy. Like I had to practice it with my therapist. Like this, I paid money for this stuff. So I'm very passionate about setting boundaries. Now, don't be rude, don't be selfish, but there's a difference between being rude and there's a difference between communicating what you need or what you like and don't like very clearly. And one thing I want you to remember from lesson number 5 is boundaries are a form of self-respect, not selfishness. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it on your mirror. I don't know, put it on your desk at work. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, not selfishness. All right, lesson number 6. Cultivate friendships with people who respect you. One thing I'm increasingly learning is I don't want to be friends with people who make side comments, who make disrespectful comments and pass it on as a joke. I can't stand those people. I used to tolerate it in my younger years. I say younger years like I'm that old, but I used to tolerate it much earlier in my life, but right now I just won't tolerate it. Now I still have some friendships that are like that, but I honestly keep them at arm's length if I can be completely honest. And for those friendships where I can tell that the person clearly doesn't respect me, in my previous years I probably would have just not said anything, but honestly now I started clapping back, and I'm not saying that's the healthiest thing, but either clapping back depending on what time of the month it is, or really just communicating to those people, I don't like what you said. Now, this is not the same thing as disagreeing. I don't agree with all of my friends. Heck, I disagree with my best friend on a lot of things. But there's a difference between disagreeing on something and just being plain disrespectful. And I don't do that anymore. So cultivate relationships with people who respect you. And this is not just friendships alone. This goes for romantic relationships, even family. Now, the honest truth is we know when people don't respect us. We know by their words, their actions, their mannerisms. So it is up to us to decide, is this something we want to keep in our lives, or is this something we want to, put some distance between? Okay, lesson number 7. The more you ignore your gut, the less you'll hear it. Some people call this intuition, some people call it your conscience. I'm a believer, and so I truly believe that it's the Holy Spirit. And if you're a believer, you'll know that the more you silence the Holy Spirit, the less you'll be able to hear him. Like, think about it. There's so many things that at some point when you started doing, like you immediately felt like, oh my gosh, I know I shouldn't be doing this. This is bad. I feel terrible. I feel guilty. But the more you ignored that voice and the more you kept doing it, like that voice got quieter and quieter and quieter until it pretty much disappeared and you stopped feeling any sorts of feelings about doing things that honestly are wrong. And the more destructive things start to feel normal. To say to all believers and non-believers, the Holy Spirit is literally called the helper. The Holy Spirit is there to help you, to guide you through making the distinction between right and wrong. And if you feel like you can no longer hear the Holy Spirit, just ask God. Literally ask and you shall receive. Lesson number 8, everything is figure outable. Now, as someone who's dealt with anxiety in the past few years, something that I've really struggled with is catastrophizing. And I know it can be really hard not to do it. It's very easy to, like, you start thinking of billions of ways things to go wrong, and then you start to spiral out of control, and like sometimes you can't help it. But I want you to think about all of the things, literally all of the things that in the moment you thought that you could never make it out of this. You could never make it through this, this would never end. Think about all of those things. And then think about the fact that each and every single time you made it out of it. Now, you may have made it out of it with, with some scratches, some scars, they may all have been near-death experiences, but you made it out of all of those things. One really good practice is to visualize how in every single situation that you struggled with, some way, somehow, in some form, you've always made it out of those situations. Let that be a reminder for everything else in your future. Like, you can work through anything. Lesson number 9. Building trust in yourself will build up your self-esteem. If you're like me and you grew up relying on other people's opinion as you move through life, you probably have a very hard time trusting yourself. I know I did. But the first step I think anyone can take to start building trust in themselves is to keep little promises to yourself every single day. The more you do this, the more you actually learn to trust yourself. Here's a simple example. You tell yourself you're going to start waking up at 6:30 a.m. every single day. 6:30 a.m. is hard. It's very hard to get up at 6:30 a.m. But you tell yourself, this is something I want to do. I will keep this promise to myself. And so what that means is that you plan, like the whole night before, you plan your life to make sure that you can get enough sleep to comfortably wake up at 6:30 a.m. and not be grumpy. So that means, you cook dinner a little earlier and eat a little earlier. That means you clean the kitchen. If you watch a show, you watch your show for a shorter amount of time, and you go to bed earlier than you typically do, so that when you hit that 6:30, you've gotten a sufficient amount of sleep and you don't feel like, like you hate the world when you get up. Just making sure that you put all the steps in place to guarantee that you will have success to wake up at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. Like doing those types of things repeatedly. Maybe you tell yourself, every single morning I'm going to fix myself a nutritious breakfast. I might eat a terrible lunch, I might eat a terrible dinner, but I'm going to fix myself a nutritious breakfast. Keeping that promise to yourself can help you start to build that trust in yourself. Also, I think a good example to kind of help you look outside of yourself is, like, think of if you had a friend, right? You had a friend who you said, every Saturday at 2 p.m., let's meet up at this coffee shop and, I don't know, work on our side projects or whatever. And every single Saturday, this friend texts you and says, hey, I can't really show up at 2. And they do this every single Saturday for 2 months, 3 months. At some point, if this friend tells you, oh, let's do this other thing at this time, at some point you stop trusting what this friend says. Like, not necessarily trusting what they say, but at some point you learn to believe that this person can't be trusted to keep their word. Now, place that back on you. I know we like to think that, we're not listening to ourselves, but we are listening to ourselves all day, every day. And if you were that friend to yourself who can't seem to keep their promises, over time, you learn that you can't keep promises to yourself. You learn that you can't do what you say. This is a thing that you feed yourself every day. You learn that you cannot be trusted with yourself. And so you act accordingly. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And let me say this, I realize that being able to do what you want to do is a privilege because, again, most of us are really just trying to make it like through the day, every day. But wherever you can and whatever stage that you're in, it's just important to start to teach yourself those things in whatever small ways you can. Like, it doesn't even have to be something as big as getting up at 6:30 or eating a nice breakfast. Like, it can be very little things. All right, lesson number 10. As you think, so shall you become. Now, this is a quote by Bruce Lee that, I think I heard this, like, I don't remember how many years ago now, but this goes into the idea that your thoughts pretty much become your reality. Think about it. Every day throughout the day, you're consistently having conversations with yourself, whether you realize it or not, and what you're consistently saying to yourself affects you either positively or negatively. And so cultivating a positive internal environment makes a difference in really how you start to see yourself and what you think you deserve. And yes, I know you've heard it a billion times. I know it's cliche at this point, but what you say to yourself matters. And I'm not just saying this in terms of like, oh, say affirmations every morning. Like, that's not even what I'm thinking about. I'm more so thinking about like, let me give you an example because I feel like I can explain these things better with examples. Let's say as you're working your regular day at work, you send an email, and then after sending that email, you realize, oh, there's a typo. Do you immediately launch into this, like, I'm so stupid, why don't I pay attention? Like, why am I so, like, it's like, do you launch into really insulting yourself for that mistake? Like, listen to how you speak to yourself, especially when you make mistakes. So I feel like that's where like a lot of the crazy stuff is. It's like, when you make mistakes, how do you speak to yourself? And this is something that I'm still struggling with to this very day. And we're human, we make mistakes. That's kind of our nature. We won't get it right 100% of the time. So taking hold of those thoughts and redirecting them is really where the work is. Telling yourself, okay, I am human, I made a typo, or I didn't attach this document, or I said this that I wasn't supposed to say in this social gathering. You were a human being and you're going to make human mistakes. Give yourself some grace. This message is for me as much as it is for you. Lesson number 11. Steward what you have now. Steward what you have today. Steward your present life well. This means that the little that you've been giving, like, go above and beyond with it. That old car that you have that you keep feeling like, man, everybody else around you has nicer, more recent cars. Take care of that car. Like, take that car for an oil change. Like, fix the brakes, I don't know, rotate your tires or something. Like, take care of that car, clean the car. Sure, it may not be what you want in this moment, but it is what you have. And taking care of it and treating it well goes a long way in preparing you for bigger things, for better things. Because when you get those bigger and better things, you will already know the value and you already know how to take care of the smaller things. And again, these are superficial things, but they apply to like a wide range of things. And if you're a believer, there's that one scripture that says, whoever can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. And I remember growing up in school, our teachers used to say, what is worth doing at all is worth doing well. And so with everything you have now, love on those things, take care of those things, because when more comes for you, you've already built up the progression on how to take care of more. Okay, lesson number 12. Don't rob yourself of the now because you're too focused on the future. It's something that I've personally gotten from a lot of people in my life. I've heard, you're always two in your head. You're always fixated on like the next thing, the future. And don't get me wrong, we want to plan for the future. That's a good thing. But I think that if you spend your time looking to the future so much, like fixating on it, you miss everything that happens in the in-between. And I really feel like life is about the in-between. You're at point A, you're trying to get to point B. This is where life actually happens. And if you're too focused on, I need to get to point B, I need to get to point B, all of this, you make it through this in-between and like you just blink and you wake up and it's 20 years from now and you realize that you've been so focused on the destination that you've missed most of the journey. I think for most of us, we think that the joy and the satisfaction that we're going to get lies in like when we've arrived, but we forget that we can be happy and enjoy that part before we arrive. Like we can love and live in and savor and just be there for that part before we arrive. Like you'll never have this moment again. You'll never be the same person that you are today that you will be tomorrow or next week or next year. Ruby Kaur has this poem in one of her books that goes, I'll never have this version of me. Let me slow down and be with her. And I just think that is such a beautiful, it's such a beautiful poem and it's such a beautiful statement. Like, sit with this version of you and embrace her. And this applies to everything, really. Lesson number 13, and this one I've had a couple of arguments with people about, but if they wanted to, they would, isn't always accurate. I don't believe it's always accurate. One of the things I learned during my master's program was that a lot of people can only do as much as, their level of awareness, their experience, and their know-how allows them to do. Like sometimes people are limited by those things. And sometimes people simply just don't want to do that thing. Sometimes people don't want to change. We've heard stories of people who did absolutely nothing for one partner. And then, they were with that partner for 15 years or however long. And they left that partner, and the next person they were with, they gave them the whole world. They did everything for that person. And I don't technically believe that this makes them a bad person. I really don't. Yes, it sucks that we didn't reap the benefits, and it sucks that, somebody else is enjoying the fruits of our labor. But sometimes people just don't want to change. And other times, time and experience will reveal things to them. So I really feel like for a lot of us, there are certain things that we can only learn at a certain point. There are certain things that only time and experience can help us learn or can reveal to us. And some people just don't have the capacity to change at that specific point in time. Maybe 2 years down the line, something will click for them and they'll change. But it may not be this year. It may not be with you. I truly believe that when people are ready and have the capacity and willpower to change, they'll change. It's not your job to force them into that reality. They'll get there on their own, or they just may never get there. But you have the choice to decide if they fit into your life and you can act accordingly. Lesson number 14. The earlier you learn conflict resolution skills, the better you will be able to navigate the different relationships in your life. The honest truth is that every relationship that we have in our life, we're going to have some form of disagreement. We're gonna have an argument where we're gonna disagree on something. We're not gonna like something that someone said. There's always gonna be a form of conflict at some point. Learning how to argue well and using those conflict resolution skills active listening, which is don't listen to respond, listen to actually understand, being able to empathize, not getting defensive, because that's a big one for all of us, and also being respectful when communicating your point to the other person. And these things are really, really hard because when you're in really any form of conflict, emotions are high and everybody just wants to get their point across. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're all just like little kids who want to be heard. But I'm challenging you today, whoever it is that's watching this, pick one skill to work on for a long period of time. Seriously, pick one skill to work on, and start with your closest relationships. You don't have to tell people, oh, you're working on this. But for something like active listening, learning to practice that in actual argument. So most of the time, I think a lot of us think that we're listening to the other person's point of view, but the honest truth is we're not. We want to hear something, and then when they say something that pisses us off, we just kind of like go at them. Like we pick that one thing and we center the argument around it, and then we're no longer arguing about the thing we were initially arguing about. We're arguing about something else in the conversation. Like pick one thing and start working on that now. It's very difficult, I know, but if you're tired of being in this loop of fighting and never getting anywhere, just start working on those things. Sometimes these things can even decelerate like argument. I've noticed with people in my life, they might say something like, we're in the heat of the moment, and they've set their point and they're angry. And I think usually the other person is expecting you to also like fire back. And usually when you respond with empathy, when you acknowledge your part in the issue, that usually catches people off guard. Seriously, I encourage you to just practice it. Find somebody who you're always like, butting heads with, and like you both are stubborn and you both want to have your way. I want you to try to empathize when they make their point and say, I'm sorry, I realized this, and mean it. Don't just say it, like mean it. And watch how they're going to be thrown off guard. Like this is literally like magic. You'll see. Just do it and come back and report. But yeah, the earlier you learn these skills, the easier it is going to be to argue well, because the honest truth is we can't escape conflict. We really can't. And if we're in a relationship with anybody in our lives, our moms, our siblings, partners, friends, you can't avoid conflict, so you might as well learn how to do it right. Lesson number 16, allow yourself to be vulnerable. You stunt your ability to make genuine and deeper connections if you withhold vulnerability. Now, I'm not saying go be vulnerable with anyone. Like go through your standard process of like vetting people to make sure that, they're a safe person to be vulnerable with. But once you get to that point, like allow yourself to unmask, allow yourself to really just be who you truly are. And I can't honestly guarantee you that it will always have a good outcome. I would be lying if I said that. But I'm just saying that if you don't take that risk, you never get to the point where you actually could find people that you like, that you truly connect with, and people who like are truly your people. And it's hard, it's uncomfortable. That's a risk that we're just gonna have to take. Lesson number 17, write down your testimony. I think it's so easy for a lot of us to forget where we've been and how far we've come. I know this sounds so cliche, but something that my husband does really well for me is like, when I'm having a moment where I'm like feeling like things aren't going well, or something didn't work out, like he loves to remind me like where I was in the depths that I was years ago, and remind me how far, like how much different things are for me now, and like how things have done like a 180. And while it's nice to have somebody to remind you of that, it's not really their responsibility, it's not their job. You need to keep that for yourself as well. You need to write it down. If there's something that you've prayed for, write it down. When that thing comes to pass, write it down. Even if it didn't come to pass, write it down. I think that we're all like such visual people that, we try to keep a mental note of stuff, but like seeing it on paper, I think it really does something. It helps a switch flip in our minds on what is actually happening and how we're actually growing and evolving, good or bad. Write it down, because years down the line, you're going to go back and read that and just see how much different things are. Like hopefully it's in a positive way. You see how much different things are in a positive way and not a negative way. Lesson number 18, not everything needs to be said. Control your tongue. You can't regret what you didn't say. Lesson number 19, and this goes back to something that I already talked about earlier in this video, but master your emotions. Something has to be the master. Either you're the master to your emotions and they are subject to you, or you were a slave to your emotions and they are the master to you. They master you. And if you let your emotions consume you, it will consume you and everything else around you. Now, don't get me wrong, you're supposed to feel the full range of human emotions. But the thing is, after you felt that anger, after you felt that frustration, after you felt that sadness, what comes next? What do you do with it? And I'm really trying to stop labeling emotions as bad, because I think those like emotions will think, oh, those are inherently bad emotions. They're not necessarily bad. They just are. You know what I mean? Like they just are. And we need to start treating emotions as data, honestly. Treat them as data, treat them as feedback. Pretty much what AI is doing with our data is it's using that to refine the information that it makes available to us and refine, like it's using that to refine the outputs it gives us to give us better and better and better outputs. The same thing I really feel like applies to your emotions. What is this emotion trying to tell me about myself? Why did that thing bother me so much? Why did I react that way? Like, why did I have such a strong reaction to that? And these things clue you into who you are, what your triggers are. Because here's the thing, if you don't know it, you can't fix it, right? If you're not aware of it, if you don't have the feedback, it's like at work, right? If your boss doesn't tell you what you're doing wrong, if you think you're doing great and your boss doesn't give you any feedback, but you're producing, terrible quality work, if they don't tell you that and you think, what you're doing is just amazing, you never learn, you never grow, and you never learn to identify, okay, well, if I want to progress to other areas of my job, like I need to be a better writer, I need to be more perfect, like I need to do these things differently. So treat your emotions as the same way. They're giving you feedback to teach you what you need to be aware of and what you need to change, really. And I'm not saying that you get those emotions so that you can change and become a different person, but it can really clue you into stuff that's unresolved, like that tightness in your chest and that lump in your throat. Use that to learn more about who you are and what that situation is trying to tell you. Lesson number 20. This is a hard one, but this goes for the sprinkle girls. Y'all don't come for me. Don't attack me. I get the premise behind the sprinkle movement. Trust me, I get the premise. I'm speaking as someone who's been married for a couple of years now. Money should not be the driving force behind you deciding somebody you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Like, sure, they take you out on nice dates and they buy you expensive things, but that should not be the measure of how you decide who you're going to do life with. And like, if you want to have children, it shouldn't be the yardstick to measure somebody who's potentially going to be the father of your children. Like, money is nice, but if their character isn't right, if they're not kind, if they're not humble, if they're not teachable, if they're proud and boastful people, your life will be a living hell. You have to think through the fact that this is somebody who you will navigate like life's lowest lows with. You would possibly navigate grief and loss with this person. Is their character enough to carry you through those hard moments? Because here's the thing, money can't fix those things. Money can't fix those character flaws. Like, money can distract you from the person they actually are. Like, somebody who never thinks they're wrong, someone who lacks basic empathy, is that really who you? Please look at their heart. Observe who they are. Observe their character, observe their actions. I know a lot of people can mask and act like somebody they're not. And honestly, for those, you just really need to ask for the grace of God to like help you pick somebody who is like not masking, someone who's truly showing you who they are. If you find somebody who's wealthy and they're kind and humble and meet all of those characteristics, please go ahead and live your best life. Just make sure that money is not the driving force, because there's so much that money can't fix, and there's just so much that, like, at the end of the day, you still have to go back and face this person, money or not. And will you be happy with your decision when you remove the factor that is money? Lesson number 21, start saving and investing now, like as soon as you can. I'm just now learning about some of these things. I wish I knew earlier about all of these investment tools that can help start making your money work for you, and it can be used to your benefits, like high yield savings account, a Roth IRA, even maxing out your 401k if you have that. Like, I didn't fully understand all of those things for such a long time because the information was just so overwhelming. But the earlier you start, the better, and the more return you'll get. Now, please don't beat yourself up about this whole thing. Just start small. Lesson number 22. You've heard this a billion times, but comparison is truly the thief of joy. I know that we're in the era in social media where we just have access to everybody, and people are just posting, their amazing lives and their amazing partners and their amazing jobs and all of these things. And it's so easy. It's so easy to be pulled into this wave of like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it's so easy. But I think realizing that we're all really running different races at different times. Like, we all can't be at certain seasons of life at the same time. We have different life circumstances, we have different backgrounds. Like, some people grew up with money so they can afford to do different things. They can afford to buy a house because they graduated without loans. And some people can afford to, travel around the world. So many different things, like so many varied experiences that form each of our unique lives. And so focusing on all of those things will be a waste of your time and will drag you deeper and deeper into just feelings that you don't want to feel. It's okay to feel behind. I promise you it's normal. But don't let comparison lead you to despondency. Again, we're all running different races. Lesson number 23. Life rarely goes as planned. I think we all think we know what's best for us and we have everything mapped out. And when things don't work out for us, we will tend to feel discouraged and disappointed and let down. And I know this sounds really weird, but have you considered that when things don't work out for you, that might actually be things working themselves out? Like maybe you weren't supposed to get that job, or maybe you weren't supposed to get in that school, or maybe you're supposed to get those things but at a later time. Like no matter how badly we want things, sometimes it's for our own good that we don't get it. We may not see it right now, we may not see the bigger picture right now or anytime soon or years and years down the line, but sometimes it's for our own good that things don't work out. And I hate to make this as a sweeping statement because this can be triggering for people who've experienced loss and a lot. So please know that I'm not saying this applies to that, but there's so many other situations in our lives where it was probably our best case scenario and we didn't know it. Lesson number 24. Rest and relaxation is productive. Yes, you've probably heard one of those things where it's like if you don't rest your body, like your body will like force you to rest, and that will typically like manifest itself in the form of like illnesses and autoimmune diseases. Like this is science, like science literally backs this up. There are hundreds if not thousands of peer-reviewed articles that have studied stress and its effect on your immune system. Like it's literally been proving that if you're in a constant state of stress, that lowers your immune system and makes you more susceptible to illnesses. Don't take it from me, take it from the thousands of articles and research that's been done on it. And finally, lesson number 25. Gratitude goes a long way. I saw a video earlier this year on Instagram. I don't remember who posted it or where it was from, but I remember this person was talking about how important it is to change your mindset about the things that you have going on in your life, about the things that you have to do. For example, a lot of us don't like to eat healthy all the time, but trying to reframe your mindset from, like, I don't want to eat, and then changing it to, I get to make myself like a healthy lunch. I have a car. I get to drive a car to the grocery store. I get to pick out, different foods from like a wide selection, a wide variety of things. And I think we also don't realize what a privilege that is. I get to swipe my card and, the purchase actually goes through. I get to come back home. I have a kitchen to prepare this in. I know this sounds like, yeah, like preachy, but I think that's something that we could all like benefit from practicing. Okay, so if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I know I have yapped on, but I appreciate you sticking through it. If you have any life lessons or anything that you've pretty much learned this year that you would like to share with me or share with other people, please put it down in the comments below. I would love to hear about it because I really like to hear other people's perspective, and hopefully you can take some of these things into 2025, carry them with you, and apply some of them in your life. I hope you have a great end to year 2024, and I will see you in 2025.